Hi, I'm Damara. I am one of the organizers of Love Action PDX, along with Julie here. Hi, Julie. Uh,
Hi, Damara.
hi. As you know, this week's Love Action Lenten Demonstration is all about women, honoring and valuing women, women's equalities, women's rights, how women make our place and move about in the world. And so we wanted to have this conversation. And I wanted to interview Julie, honestly, and learn a little bit more about her story and how these things played out for her. Um, so here we are, and let's start with a little information about who you are. Julie, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks, Damara. And thanks for everybody who's tuning in. Hopefully, there will be more than three. Um, yeah, we're just getting started. So, I am someone who's born and raised in Oregon. I grew up here. I spent about 12 years in Southern California, but I'm a social worker by training. I also have a doctorate in ministry in leadership and global perspectives. I have been a social worker. I have been an educator. I've been a leader in nonprofit and public systems around behavioral health and prevention. Um, I'm called to serve and to, I'm really clear that my call is to bear witness to people's pain and
Hmm.
to participate in their hope and healing. And so that's a big motivator for me. Um, and beyond that, though, I mean, those are the things. I'm a single woman. I have never been married. I don't have children. And for, you want to throw it in, I got three cats. So you can decide what that means as a single woman. I don't wear cats on my clothing or decorate my house with cats.
Just to be clear.
Just to be clear, I got cats because they're low maintenance, and when you're single,
Yeah.
it's taking care of like a dog. It requires more, but cats are
Yeah.
lower maintenance, so it always fit with my lifestyle, and I think it's
Mm-hmm.
good to have other living beings in your home.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I also love to travel and to do things that are maybe a little off the beaten path. I mean, I often put in my bios that I have zip lined on four continents.
Oh, yeah.
And my goal is to hit them all. And somehow Antarctica is going to have to rig up a zip line.
You're gonna have to make that one
Go.
happen.
Yeah. I mean, why not? Because I love, a bit of adventure in life.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I have good friends and good family. I lead a small house church. And in many ways, I am incredibly blessed. So that's a little brief. I won't go
Yeah.
too long into all that stuff.
Yeah, blessed and very interesting. Just real quick, I feel like I might be able to guess, but what are the four continents that you've ziplined on?
I have zip lined on North America, South America, Africa, and
Okay.
Asia. Though I've been to Europe, I haven't zip lined in Europe, so that's a reason to go back.
Yeah.
And I haven't been to Australia yet, so there you go. And
Nice.
for the super adventurous, they actually have some of the best bungee jumps in Australia in the world. So, you know,
Do you consider yourself
well,
then
actually, New
super
Zealand.
adventurous?
I have
Would you
bungee
do that?
jumped a few times, and I love, just that pushing ourselves into that space of this could be scary, but the only thing holding me back is my mind.
Mm, yeah. Oh, that's cool. That's actually a big one for me too. If fear is the only thing holding me back, then I feel like, shoot, I'm gonna have to do it now. So
Yeah,
and actually, just talking about women, that is a unique, important characteristic, I think, that um, is helpful. It is
yeah.
good to have, not always easy to have, but so I guess that kind of makes me wonder where you got that from and how that was for you growing up. So, like, can you tell me, like, how has your family influenced you as a woman in that way, or in any way?
So I was thinking about this, and I think there's two stories to be told, and my family. we're not the best historians going back generations and generations. I can go back to my grandparents, but that's about as far as I have deep knowledge. On my father's side, my grandmother Frances, her parents immigrated from the Ukraine, and they were very traditional in lots of ways. And they were hardworking folks who uh, women did hard work and they did what their men wanted them to do.
Mm.
And when my grandmother married my grandfather, she learned after the fact that he could be violent and abusive. And when she went home to her mom, she crying and in tears, her mom said, "You can stay here tonight, but then you got to go back. You made your bed. Now you have to sleep in it." And that was the attitude on their side, was that violence is just part of life, and women had to deal with it. And the sadness for me that I hold on to, I'm sorry, do you hear that distraction?
A little bit, yeah.
I might have to check that in a minute. Um, the sadness for me is I really never got to know my grandmother Frances. She died at age 49 of a heart attack, and I can't say it was because of the conditions in which she lived. At the same time, we know that stress can have a big impact on our lives and our outcomes, and I cannot help but wonder how the violence and the abuse that she lived with affected her, not just her overall life, but how long she lived. So
Mm.
that's one side of the story. The other side of the story is my mom's mom, Grace. And Grace, I mean, she married into a farming family. I mean, they were hardstock, Montana, North Dakota. These are hardworking folks. And in those days, for my grandma, women were homemakers. And grandma did not want to be a homemaker.
Oh, twist.
Grandma,
Yeah.
my grandfather could not fix a tractor to save his life, but grandma could.
Mm,
And while
that's cool.
grandma was supposed to raise the kids, she would rather be out in the field. She would rather be doing business. She would rather be doing
Mm.
other things. And how that played out to her children, she had three daughters and two sons. My mom is the eldest. When my mom went to college, it was expected in those days, this was the 50s, that, you go to school, maybe get a degree in home economics and find a nice husband. Mom got a degree in microbiology, which was not, women didn't get
Mm.
degrees in science. Women didn't do that. And her sister Gail, next in line, Gail started in a more traditional path. She was a teacher for a bit, but then she fell in love with flying. And she became one of the first bush pilots in Alaska
Wow.
and has featured in the Smithsonian as a pioneer in women's aviation. And my grandmother beget
Mm.
these two women who continue to influence the women. My Aunt Gail had two sons, but then like one of their daughters, my cousin Erin, is a wildlife photographer doing stuff all over the world in a world that doesn't feature women in photography and especially in
Mm.
wildlife photography. And she is making, doing education and mentoring young girls and young women in how to do this. And so, I mean, this has passed down to me from these
Mm.
folks and how it got played out in my life. And I will say this with my father. My father never said, you can't do certain things because you're a girl.
Mm.
My mom, neither of them. They were like, you want to do that? Great, go ahead. You want to climb trees? Climb trees. You want to, do science? Do science. You want to do it, play softball? Because they didn't have baseball, little league when I was a kid. It was softball for girls. You want to do that?
Mm.
Do that. And they never said you couldn't. And it was never even, do you want to go to college? It was just assumed, of course, you'll go to college. And
Mm.
that expectation, I think my mother and my grandmother, they set this pattern that says women can. And so I could. And I think that has been a huge influence in my life. Um, there have been times where, well, we'll come into some of that later, but I think knowing that, I mean, I paid for my last year of grad school by commercial fishing with my Aunt Gail's husband in Alaska. Not really a girl thing to do, but I spent a
Mm,
summer at Stinky and hauling fish because women can do all the same things. And I treasure those opportunities.
yeah. Wow. Just thinking about how much our legacy does set us up for that, and how much like the women before us do influence us, whether it's like, nope, you just need to accept your lot, or nope, don't accept your lot. Like how much that um, really affects us. And I'm just curious, you don't need to necessarily go into a big explanation if you want, but how do you think it would have gone if, say, like your dad was like, no, women can't do that? Or like, you could do this stuff, but there are limits on what a woman could do. How do you think that would have, do you think that would have changed anything for you?
I think it would have. I mean, my dad had definite expectations. So I mean, I had to have long hair. I always
Mm,
had long hair, and when you are a kid that climbs trees and runs and rides bike, and you have long hair, it gets tangled and knotted, and
mm,
it was always hard for me. But that was an expectation. I had to have long hair, and so it was not until after my parents divorced, and really even later, that I started shortening up. Um,
mm,
it's more by preference and being able to manage than anything else. But that was a thing. Um, but my dad, I don't know. My mom said my dad always wanted a son, so I think he was a little
mm,
okay that I was a little more tomboy.
mm,
But he was also, when you understand who you come from and who your parents are, there was a lot of sorrow in my dad.
mm,
And so I think he loved seeing me succeed because in that way he succeeded.
mm. So you had like a I'm proud of you, kind of an extension of myself. You're not the son that I wanted, but you're like the daughter that I'm proud of, and be
Yeah.
yourself, but also kind of still do this thing that women are expected to do. Still look
Yes.
womanly. And I think an interesting thing about that too is it's uh, so something that always comes to mind for me in conversations like this is the norms. And even that kind of accidental, like, I'm proud of you. Yeah, go climb that tree. But keep your hair long, and it can kind of like hinder you without necessarily meaning to. But it's kind of like these expectations that put on women that kind of, yeah, do this, but here's the cap, kind of like, and that, yeah, it's just kind of where my mind always goes, like the socialization. Um, what are the norms that dictate who women are, what we can be, what we have to look like, how we're supposed to behave. And actually, for me, as I'm learning more and more about like how does this whole patriarchy thing affect me and my
Hmm.
whole life, I'm realizing just how embedded these are. That they come up in such sneaky ways, and unexpected, kind of not obvious ways necessarily, like how long your hair is, or you have to sit a certain way, or like you have to make people comfortable around you. Um, and like just forever going back millennia for women. And something that's interesting, I think, that I would love to hear your take on is because I know a lot of times it's also connected, there are religious implications, or like women's
Hmm.
norms are so much connected, and like through our religious traditions, we're told even more how women are supposed to be. So how has that played out for you in your life? Like social norms linked to religious tradition, what does that look like for you?
I'll start with the social norms, and I'll give another example from my family. When I was in kindergarten, and I am old enough that when I was in kindergarten and first grade, um, it wasn't just social norms, but it was the rules. Girls wore dresses to school.
Mm.
You couldn't wear pants. Well, I wanted to wear pants. And this was a
Yeah, it's
thing.
hard to climb a tree in a dress.
It is, but if you do, and they don't put shorts on you, you're going to be flashing things, right?
Yeah.
There's,
Also not
you know,
okay for women.
I
Yeah.
mean, I could go on. I mean, my great grandmother used to give us kids, practical gifts for Christmas and birthdays. So she would always get me underwear with little ruffles on the bum. And
It's
I had
practical.
the audacity to say that I didn't like them. And she was
Oh.
very offended.
Oh.
Uh, but then she started to give us money after that. So I think that was better. What kid wants underwear, anyways?
That worked out. Nice. Also very practical, which is good.
Yeah.
Good job.
But for my this thing about me wanting to wear pants, I mean, mom, she said she negotiated with me. She's like, okay, here's the deal. When you go to school, you have to wear the dress, but when you come home, you can change. And,
Mm.
she gave me choices, but we had to negotiate. And apparently I was, a little bit pushy about these things. Yeah. And how that has translated as, so yeah, I was a tomboy and I played sports that were more identified as boy sports, softball. I mean, everybody has the rumors. If you play softball, obviously you're a lesbian. Well,
Hmm.
I'm a cisgender, heterosexual woman, but the assumption is always, oh, if you do those things, you're a lesbian.
Hmm.
Or if you walk a certain way, well, because I've been told that I don't walk right,
Oh.
that I walk too masculine.
Mm.
I've been told that I'm intimidating. And I'll own some of
Mm.
that. I think there was a time when I was a lot more scary. And I still have a look that I can give you. Like if
Mm.
I'm focused on a subject and or like I'm focused on my computer and someone walks in, I can look up with a look that says, "You should die now."
A little intimidating. I guess I could see now,
Yeah.
not like not later now.
And throughout my career, I've had titles. I've been a director, an executive, a
Mm.
professor, a dean. And when you
Mm,
put a
wow.
title with that kind of a look, then it can be scary. So then
Mm.
I had to, one, I don't know if this is socialization. I think it is, whether as a man or a woman, I think it would be wise. But I had to start recognizing, oh, I have this focus look that is scary. And I would
Mm.
start telling people, hey, if this ever happens, I just need a moment to adjust from screen or task to human being. And it is not about
Mm.
you, it's not personal. And I also made a commitment to build the relational aspect. Um, I think that's a human thing to do, but I think it is also more expected of women to focus on relationship. Men are rarely expected to also focus on relationship. And even though, as believers, as Christians, we know that the heart of everything is our relationship to one another, that we love one another as ourselves, but for that expectation that, well, it's really the women who do that, and the men do things, the women do people.
Yeah. And I don't want to interrupt your story too much,
No,
but I'm
that's fine.
just that's I feel like that's such a good example of I picture if there was a man in your role, you're a dean, you're working on something, and somebody comes in and they look up, and if he gives them the "you need to die now" face, they I imagine they would be like, "Oh wow, he's not very friendly, but that's who he is, so we need to adjust around it. We need to work. I need to change myself to be okay with how he is." Whereas I imagine with you being a woman and a dean, that there's still maybe extra pressure of, whoa, whoa, you still need to be friendly and make me comfortable and prioritize me in this relationship. You're supposed to be socially,
Well, for lack of a better term,
yeah.
I can't be a scary bitch.
Yeah, you get in trouble for that. A guy, maybe not. Yeah, and you get called that. I mean, like, or that's the idea. If you don't look friendly, now you're a scary bitch. And that's just yeah, part of our socialized norms that has always irked
I mean, I
me
think
a bit.
the challenge, I think, as you mentioned, these things are socialized. They go back millennia, and I think as it ties into faith, where some of these traditions passed down, I think it's important to recognize the difference between tradition and what the Bible says.
Hmm.
Um, and also to recognize that the Bible was written in a certain time, culture, and context. And in that time, Jewish or Christian, throughout the world, I mean, the world at that time, women were not allowed to hold property in most societies. Property was passed down through the male generations, and women were included by marriage, um, but they didn't inherit property. And that was a tradition of the time. It is not mandated in scripture.
Hmm.
I mean, scripture does echo that. When things pass down, it does pass down through the male generations. But that was a mirror of the existing culture. It was not, and that's the way it has to be always. And I think that's one of the things that we struggle with is that as we read the Bible, we assume it to mean everything for everyone forever.
Like prescriptive. Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
right. I mean, when we look at the laws of the Torah being the first five books of the Bible,
Hmm.
where we learn the story of Israel and the laws that God set forth. Today, as believers, we don't hold to the 500 plus laws that were set forth
Mm.
because we know that we are free from that. We recognize that those were given to a specific people at a specific time, but there are other things that were cultural in the Bible that people don't notice. At the same time, culture shifts slowly. And, we could go on a whole
Mm.
sociological thing about um, high culture, low culture, how things are embedded and nuanced that we don't even recognize. Like a look, the way you look at someone in one
Mm-hmm.
culture means something profound. And if you're not from that culture, you might not even recognize it. It's very nuanced. It's in our mannerisms, in our language, in our traditions that have been passed down, and so culture shifts slowly. And as we have moved through time, we have seen women gain more autonomy, and yet there are those who have always said, "But the Bible says no,"
Mm.
and that impacts us. You and I were talking earlier about how even the right to own property
Mm-hmm.
that 50 or 60 years ago I might not have been able to get a loan to buy my house because I'm a
Yeah.
single woman. There was a time where a woman could not get a credit card or take out a loan without the signature of a responsible man, her husband or her
Mm.
father. Well, my father passed away 25 years ago, or longer now, 35. Oh goodness. um,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, but would I have, I am able to do things today that weren't allowed before. And today we see that as normal and acceptable.
Mm.
Um, but, some people still struggle with those things. So I could ramble forever, but we want to keep moving forward, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and how those norms aren't just interactions with people. They aren't just expectations of how you make an individual feel when you look at them. It's also institutionalized and has been for so long.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, and that, yeah, it's me and my generation, that's just like mind blowing to think like, whoa, that's so unfair. That is so, yeah, but yeah, as we move along. Um, yeah, sorry, I could go off on that for
that's
a
okay. But
while
good.
too.
I mean, I'm sitting here going, so, and that's one of those things. I think it's understanding one another. Like I am 60 years old. I am on the cusp of Gen X boomer. People like to say I'm a boomer because I was born in the last couple months of 1964, but I'm like,
Mm.
I'm not a boomer. At the same time, it's like, people lock us in, but I have
Mm.
lived through those things. I mean, women's rights, women's live, that has been part of my life. Um,
Mm.
and we forget we still don't have an equal rights amendment for women in our country,
Mm.
right? And there was a time where women were not allowed to vote, right? That wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
We think about it forever because the world changes so rapidly now, but it was not that long ago. It was not that long ago that a woman couldn't get along. It was not that long ago that we tried to get equal rights and we still don't have
Yeah. Yeah. And just to, I guess, hang a lantern on it, what comes to mind too is we are two white women having this conversation also. And I learned, like, sadly, I learned this not too long ago that like women's suffrage in the US was in 1920s, 1920, I think. So it's been a little over 100 years, but that only applied to white women. Like
it.
black
Yeah,
women were still not actually in practice, maybe not on paper, like actually allowed to vote until civil rights movement. And that was in my mom's lifetime. Yeah. And
yeah,
that um, yeah. So it's when we talk about women as a whole, that there's still these like subsections that we're like still privileged to or excluded from. And yeah, it depends on I come from a family of hardworking women who also did a lot. So I also come from this privileged place of women can do what we try to do. And that's still not everybody has that legacy either. Um,
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah, and actually, uh, yeah, I think a lot of these norms are designed to keep us back, keep us comfortably back to serve uh, the people who are supposed to run society, and kind of keep us
And
in a
as
narrow role.
women, we adapted within the confines of our culture,
Mm,
within the limits to get things done anyway. We always find a way. I mean, I think that's the beautiful thing about people is we do always find a way, even when we are confined or constrained.
mm,
But isn't it better when we say, why are we having these limits on what you can do because of your gender, or because of your skin color, or because of your first language, or because of whatever, the way you think and process, or the way you look,
mhm,
all those intersections. We put limits on people because ultimately, say that they don't fit the white male norm,
mm.
and yet we still find a way. And there's it reminds me, there's a saying in about nature that nature always finds a way, right? Maybe we
Yeah.
all do. We're part of that, right? God created us.
Yeah, that's actually that reminds me, Tamar Tisby, he's a Black Christian historian and he does great work and he talks about like the arc of justice bends um
Mm,
a certain way and actually talks about like the spirit, Holy Spirit as the spirit of justice, like helps bend that arc towards justice, but it takes people actually doing the work. Like it doesn't we have systems in place to stop that from happening, but just as people and as God moves us through time, we move towards justice. And I love that, and I could see that, um, and
yeah,
it's
as you
still
say
like
that, I have to
pushing.
bring up one more thing that
Oh,
you
okay.
and I were talking about Richard Rohr in his most recent book, The Tears of Things, the wisdom, prophetic wisdom in an age of outrage. And he says something about the prophets, likening them to John Lewis getting into good trouble. And he
Mm,
refers to what the prophets do into creating holy disorder.
mm,
Looking down because I was reading it. Good trouble, holy disorder. I think
mm.
that's a call for us.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Yeah, as women, and I think you and I in particular, like what we're doing with Love Action, and Um, yeah, that is a call, and we're pushing back against these limits. Like you said, culture moves slowly. And so I guess I think we're coming up on our time. I know we're trying to keep this within a time window. So I'm just curious, how have you experienced limitations on your ability to like, serve and lead as a woman? Like you are clearly a leader, educated, experienced leader in so many different areas. Like how has that like panned out for you?
So I'll be brief on this so we can get to the what do we do, because there have been limits. When I was in college, I wanted to be in ministry and full time. I got a degree in Christian education. But at the time, and in the denominations, the places where I was, the only place for women to serve full time was really in children's ministry or in women's ministry. And I didn't feel called to either. And one of my professors, about 2 weeks before graduation, came to me and said, "Do you know what you really want to do?" And I was like, "No, please enlighten me." And he was like, "You want to be a social worker." And I was like, "I do." But he was right. I have a passion for people who are struggling, right? And so, that was actually a good referral and created space for me in my time also to move into a field that, you know what, women can do a lot. There are more women in social work than anything else. And there have been historic leaders throughout our history of women social workers or people in that from Dorothy Day to Jane Addams. There are women who have led in serving others. And there's an acceptance, I will say that part of that is it's an acceptable female space to nurture and care for others. But for me, it is also more than that. Um, when I had the opportunity to go into academia, that is a very male dominated space. But because I was a woman, I was given more freedom, or because I was in social work and in health and human services, that is traditionally more female, as of course, as long as you're not a doctor. I mean, I have a doctor, but I'm not, you can have the whole, "Are you a real doctor?" conversation.
Ah.
And I have long believed that title doesn't matter, degree doesn't matter. It is who we are. And so I've experienced those limits. I've found myself in those spaces where I had less opportunity. And I guess I also wanted to mention my denomination that my church is in, and I lead a house church, does not ordain women. And for many people, that's a problem. Um, and I think we'll speak to that in a minute. But for me, I really believe that I'm simply called to do what I'm called to do. If God has gifted me, then I will use my gifts as He provides place for me to do that. And I'm going to demonstrate and model who I am, who He is, with the resources and tools and gifts that He has given me.
Yeah, I feel like that's a good segue into the like, what do we do about it now? Like,
Yeah,
what would you say as like moving forward as women in this context with limitations? What do we do?
I think that exactly it. I mean, I do it anyways, and not in defiance, but because I am able, because I have gifts. And God doesn't give us gifts to sit over there. He doesn't say, "You know what,
Mm,
I'm going to gift you as a teacher, but you can only teach 3 people."
mm. Or only
He
kids.
equips us for
Yeah.
children. I mean, I don't know too many small children who want to have deep conversations with me because unfortunately I tend to go very intellectual. Or fortunately, I go very intellectual.
Mhm.
Um, I'm not a teacher of children. I have done curricula for them. I can, but my heart is more with adults.
Mm,
Um, God has gifted me as a leader. I don't think He wanted me to only lead in certain spaces. So where He provides opportunity, then I will follow His lead. And I'm going to do that with humility, and I'm going to follow Him. You know, when I think about ordination in my church, I've never felt called to be ordained. That's not a thing I seek or pursue, but I can also see how it can be important for women who come after me,
Mm.
right? Even as I, referenced my grandparents, the women who, and my parents, my aunts, the women who have come before me, you know, they have created a way for me to be able to do what I do, and not just my family, but throughout society. They've created a way for me. So I feel like I have a responsibility to create a way for the next generation, because if that is important to them, then they need to be able to have that. And I think we need to be able to have the conversations about why have we withheld that. We know that some denominations ordain women, some don't. In more conservative denominations, that's where we have more challenges on whether that this should happen. I think to have the conversations and not go at it with a judgment of you're wrong, but simply to say, can we learn together? Are we all willing to be humble and to seek God together? And what does that look like? Are we willing to say, I might be wrong? Am I willing to say, I might be wrong? And I don't think that's a female trait. I think that is what God asks us to do. He's asked us to walk humbly with him. And when we, as Jesus, humbled himself unto the point of death, though he was God, when we do that, it creates space for honest conversation. When I don't hold myself up as I know more, I'm better, or as Jesus could have, I'm God, I have title, I have power. It's not what he asks us to do. My call is to seek first God's kingdom, and the rest will follow. Um, and I think that as we look at women and we look at scripture, I see Deborah, I see Ruth, I see the different prophetesses throughout the Old and the New Testament. I see the women who are spoken of in the Gospels and throughout all of the New Testament who were recognized as leaders, as businesswomen, as women of influence, who without them, the ministry of Jesus, of Paul, of the apostles would not have happened. They are seen as teachers and models and key partners in ministry. And I believe Deborah in particular, she was an actual judge. God placed her into that space. And I think when the Bible calls that out, it is even more significant, because in that day and culture, men can be named in the Bible because they're men, because they were born. We get the birth descended, and it's only on occasion do you get in the birth lines, and then there was Rahab. She was in it's very rare, but it is exceptional. When we call out women in the Bible, I think they become examples and lean toward all the women who were also doing the same things without recognition. I think I'll land on, so many believers have been socialized around, or taught about not just socialized, taught about the Proverbs 31 woman, who is, often referred to as a wife. But if you read through all of it, it speaks to, she buys fields, she builds businesses, she invests in her kids, but she also invests in her community. She is wise, she is humble, and ultimately it comes down to a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised, period. It doesn't say a married woman or a meek woman. It's just a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. And I think that is a reminder of all the things God created: mankind, male and female, in God's image. God's image has to include both genders somehow. And even though that doesn't make sense in some of our little brains, it makes sense from to God, and if I am made in God's image as a woman, and if I fear him, I am worthy to be praised.
Mm.
Why not?
Yeah. Yeah, that it's not God who, I mean, we could have so much nuanced conversation with so many people about it, but I don't think it's God who says women need to be small and just help or this. I do think it is God who is moving this whole arc toward like God created us equal and we all have important parts to
And
play.
good
And good, yeah. Yeah, and that um, we don't have to like set God aside of like, well, we can't talk about God because he's just going to tell me I need to be this small Sunday school teacher. And it's like and a wife that's like the goal of my life. I think God really does, like you said, the gifts that he's given you and the opportunities that he lays a path and calls us forward and empowers us to do so much more than what the world around us says women are supposed to do. And even like right now with the pushback going on right now to kind of get women back in the home, out of work, out of politics, with white Christian nationalism, that vision of women are supposed to be home with all the kids, and that's should keep you occupied and satisfied for your life. I'm really grateful that I don't think God says that, and so we could actually follow his lead, listen to him, ask him for help, and ask him to make the way and help us to keep pushing against those limitations to the freedom that God made us for and wants for all of us. Um, I don't know if that
yeah,
makes sense, but
it does. I mean, we see that God has given us freedom, that through Jesus, that he has brought us all into a right relationship with him. And through that, he doesn't call us to then go sit and be quiet. Every
Mhm.
single one of us, male and female, we're called to make disciples. We're called to share the love of who he is. We're called to love him for who he
Mm.
is and to love our neighbors as ourselves. There's no gender
Yeah.
limit on so much.
Yeah. Yeah. Like we're both designed to promote human flourishing and to
Yeah,
oppose injustice. And yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, I feel like I could just keep going forever.
we
But this
could,
has, I know, we'll have to
but
do
you've
more
got
of
a meeting
these.
coming up.
I do. I have to go. But this has been so much fun talking to you. I learned so much just about your story and about history, and it's been great. So thank you so much, Julie. I really
Thank you,
appreciate it.
Damara.